Cassidy Reaume. We've been married 18 years. And we have Karina and Parker, who are 11 and 12, sitting right out there. And we met them in Russia when they were 2 and 1.
My name is Jackie, and I am single and working, and that is my child right up front and center.
Yeah, Jessica.
And I was a foster parent and adoptive parent.
My name is Kris Collins, and this is my husband David. And we have 7 kids, and we kind of fell into fostering. We haven't adopted, but we've fostered over the last 6 years.
Yeah, I think we've had about 15, 16 children at different times during the last 6 years.
So I guess just my first question, I'll kind of queue up a couple questions and then we'll kick it over to you guys to ask some also. Yeah, I'd love to share, just give us an overview, like the basic timeline and overview of what your journey has been, whether adopting or fostering.
So as Kris mentioned, we started, our first introduction to fostering was 6 years ago. And it came about not intentionally. We had, our daughter started actually babysitting these 2 children who had been placed in a guardianship situation with a friend of ours. And they both, they were a couple and they both worked full time. So they just needed a babysitter during the days. So we started doing that. And then after a period of a couple weeks of this situation, this family became really untenable for them to really do, I guess, fulfill this guardianship role. And the question just came to us, if we wanted to take these 2 children in. They were a 2-year-old and a kid that was, I think, 3 to 4 weeks at that time, so a newborn. Anyway, so that's how it got started. So we ended up taking those kids in, and we're not foster parents at the time, so we kind of shared under their guardianship for about 6 months and applied for our foster license, and then ended up taking care of those kids. And then went on, we actually had those children, the 2 children, for 2.5 years. They stayed with us. And then ended up being adopted by another family. So that was our kickoff.
And then they had our number, and
Right.
You don't have kids anymore? And then the phone starts ringing.
Yeah.
So when they call, we try not, we basically say, like, we still have 2 kids at home, and the 2.5 years with these kids were beautiful and amazing and hard and a lot of things. And so taking another full-time placement is a little too much for us. So we take them on a temporary basis, which we've learned sometimes it doesn't really exist for the foster care system. But sometimes it'll be overnight, sometimes it'll be 3 days, a week, 2 weeks, a few months. We just try to work with what they might need and if it's a good timing for us. So that's how we've had the other 14 kids in the last few years.
So I started fostering about 6 years ago. I was just feeling the call to foster, and I was very resistant to that call for a number of reasons for a long time. And it was a family friend who started fostering, and I was just messaging her with my fears, and she gave me the encouragement and final push I needed to start the process. So finally said yes to that call and started fostering. Working full-time, I fostered older teens, so 16, 17, and 18-year-olds, because they can mostly take care of themselves. I don't need to be home to feed them and clothe them and all those things. And so, yeah, I did that about 5 years, and then 2 years ago, I got a phone call at 2 o'clock in the morning, and from the foster agency, and they only want one thing at 2 a.m. in the morning, and that's an emergency placement. And I had an 18-year-old at that time who was about to go off to college, and she was about to go, and I wanted a break, and I did not want another kid. So I was like, I ignored the call, and I turned around to go back to sleep. It is probably the most clearly I've ever heard God. I heard him say, "If I call, will you answer?" And I sighed and thought about it, and I was like processing like what was happening, and like I was just like being woken up in the middle of the night trying to process all this, and the phone rings again. They're trying to wake me up, and so I answer it this time, and they're like, "We have a 9-year-old that needs placement tonight," and my immediate reaction was, a 9-year-old? No, like I don't know what, I've been fostering these older teens. I had no idea what to do with a 9-year-old, what grade they were in, what their abilities were, what they eat, like nothing. So I, again, said no. I was like, well, I'll take her tonight. Like that's why they were calling, they needed a placement tonight. But I was like, you'll find another place for her, right? And they give me this like, well, we can, but you're the last home in the agency and we'd have to look outside the agency, and that's foster speak for no, we're not going to. They probably know how that goes. But anyway, so I was like, fine, just bring her. And they come to my house, and like I walk into the living room where they are, and I look at her and I'm like, oh, she's not going anywhere. It was kind of like this instant reaction. When she came, we didn't know very much about her, or it was just an emergency placement. Not much was known. We didn't know if she'd be going back to family. Normally in foster care, reunification is always the first goal, and so that was still the case plan, even though they had no idea who the potential reunification was with. But it turned out that there wasn't anybody to reunify her with, and so she was open for adoption. DCS was asking me to adopt. I was feeling called to adopt. I was still resistant to that. When I started fostering, I did it with the express intention to not adopt. That's part of the reason why I took the older teens as well. But after much prayer and discernment, that's where I felt like God was calling me to do, was to adopt. And so that she came in March of 2019 and adopted in March of 2020. So it's been just over a year, and it's been great. And I did continue fostering after I adopted, but co-parenting a 10, 11-year-old with teenagers is really, really challenging, and them having separate boundaries and things like that. So I did end up relinquishing my foster license about 8 months ago. So I am simply a mother now of a beautiful 12-year-old. So that is the short story.
All right. Well, I was actually born with a medical disorder that would, after a lot of talking with doctors for a while and everything, I probably always knew it, but just didn't get clarification until we started seeking it, that it would be very dangerous for me to deliver a baby. So we went through a process of adoption, had some family member, just trying to figure out, we had some different domestic adoption possibilities fall through, and just really being called to adopt from Russia. At the time, we had a family member who was adopted from Russia also, and some friends, and we just really kind of talked a lot with them, and felt that was where we should and were going to adopt from. It took us a while. It was a lot of paperwork and a lot of hoops to jump through with the Russian government, and some stops and starts. But we ended up meeting Karina and Parker when Parker was about 8 months old, and Karina was a year and 8 months. They were siblings. And biological siblings, just a year apart. And so we went to meet them, about that time. Went to go meet them, got to be in Russia visiting them for 1 week, right at Christmas time, before their first and second birthday, and then had to come home for about 3 months while the judges and the government got ready for us to go back and have court and be able to bring them home. So that was a very hard time waiting, like not knowing if anybody was giving them hugs goodnight, or, you know, after we had already met them, like leaving them there was pretty tough. But I knew, like, every day we had trust that God would reunite us, even though that was my biggest fear at the time, that we would have met them and be their parents, but not get to be able to bring them home. So that was my biggest fear during that time. But about 3.5 months later, they called actually on Parker's first birthday, which was very hard because it was his first birthday, and Karina's second birthday had passed a week before, and then his birthday was that day, and we still hadn't heard anything. And then that night they called us and said they're ready for us to come back. And so we went for a month, got to be with them every day, and had to stay over there for a month, but got to see a lot of the culture and bond with them while they were there, or while we were all there together before coming home a month later. So that was in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So yeah, now they are 11 and 12.
So it was about a
And-
year discernment process to if we were going to attempt biological family, and then a year after that to figure out how we were gonna adopt, and then 2 years after that from start to completion. It's about a 4-year journey to the part of meeting Karina and Parker, and then the real journey began.
Yep. So.
So I guess my next question would be, tell us, like, how did your relationship with Jesus influence your discernment to make this decision?
Go ahead. Yeah.
No, good. You know, our whole decision wasn't really a decision except to let our 12-and-a-half-year-old babysit. We homeschooled. She's responsible, great with kids. Actually, I thought it was just going to be a 2-year-old. No, a baby. It was a newborn. And I think somehow I missed the 2-year-old maybe. I don't know. Anyway, the 2-year-old showed up too. And our lives just changed. At the time, we had 5 kids at home. So our oldest at home was 18, our youngest was 6. And I mean, he was a newborn, right? He was a pretty good baby at the time. And as soon as we heard that the other family wasn't going to be able to follow through with the guardianship, they had already talked about placing them in foster care, and they couldn't find a home for both of them, so they were going to get split up. And so our daughter was crying, holding the baby, like, no! And our kids were like, Mom, we can do this. And I was like, ah. So there were 2 teenage boys. 1, 2, 3, yeah. So I think it was just, I knew these kids needed love, and our kids were asking to give of themselves, and they knew it was going to cost a lot. It meant the boys had to, like, one boy had to give up his bedroom, and they both had to, sleep together, and it meant a lot of changes in the bedrooms and the time, because I also said, like, I've done 7 kids, and I'm not going to get up in the middle of the night, so are you guys really sure about this? And they're like, we'll do it, Mom, we'll tag team, we can do this. And I just felt like, how can I not let my kids have this opportunity to give of themselves, to sacrifice? One kid was a senior in high school, but I'll do my role, I'll do my shift. So I think it's that.
Yeah, I would agree with, it's just,
He got a text message. Hey.
I did. I'm at work and I get
From
this.
Jesus?
We're not sure. She texts me in the middle of the day, what would you think of adopting 2 kids? I'm like, whatever. But it's just, I don't know, I mean, we've kind of tried to live, okay, what's God asking of us? And it's, to love the people that you're presented with. I think that was the situation, God brought these children in, and we just felt we were being asked, to love these kids that were being brought to us, and I, just said yes. I mean,
And we had no clue, like, what that would mean and how long that would
we
mean.
did. So.
It was about the time when I started feeling called to foster. It was around the same time I was coming back to the faith. I grew up Catholic and kind of went away and then came back. And so this has really just been part of a larger journey of growing closer in relationship to Jesus and learning to live out his will for my life. If you're listening through my story, I said no a lot before I would say yes. And so it's really been a journey of me learning how to let go of my fear and trust God. And it's been really beautiful being so afraid to make these jumps, and then I make the jump, and then everything I was afraid of just suddenly disappears. It's the weirdest experience, and you think I would start being more trusting to say yes again, and I haven't 100% learned that yet. I still get so caught up in this fear, and so it's been really beautiful journey growing closer to God and learning to trust him and let him lead my life and accepting those graces. Fostering older teenagers is hard. Yes, I'll just leave it at that. It's very hard. But it didn't feel that hard while I was doing it. And looking back, I was like, that was only through God's grace. And I realized the moment that it was time for me to relinquish my license, I just felt like that grace go away. And it all of a sudden became completely unbearable, unmanageable. It was a very much before and after kind of thing. So because discerning to let go of that was really hard. So yeah, it's just I think that's all I have then. Yeah, it's just been a part of this larger journey of learning to say yes. The other piece of it too is when I bought my house, I was also kind of hearing Jackie, you're buying this house, but it's not just for you. And since day one, I've always had somebody living there, and whether it's a roommate or foster kids or former foster kids coming back or whatever, it's stayed pretty full. So I think what Abby said at the beginning, just living this life of hospitality and encounter with the people you come into contact with.
I would say I don't know. I guess I would I don't know if anybody feels this way, but this is my experience, is that I would say that it's okay, because this is the immediate thing that pops into my head, that it's okay for you to, I had a dream and a picture of what it would look like to be a mom, and sometimes that carries out in the way that you think that it, or that you always thought that it would, I suppose, and sometimes it's different. So for a lot of people, for a lot of women, you might imagine yourself becoming pregnant, being excited with your husband and becoming pregnant and bonding with a baby for 9 months. And, if you're the husband, being able to support and, I don't know, sing to the baby while they're growing and all of that. and, you know, deliver a beautiful bundle of joy that is, you know, when you look at them, has your eyes or your husband's smile or your curls, or, you know, and that was a big dream of mine, honestly, and I think for a lot of us. So to me, I would say that a huge part of my my journey and my faith is that, to me, I felt like that was, like, I wasn't having that I felt like I was selfish to want those things or to have that dream, and that I shouldn't make that known or shouldn't say that that was my dream. And I want to say to any of you, if that is your experience, that it is okay to want that. It is not selfish. It is okay. It is your dream. And I feel like once I said that, and let God know that that was the desire of my heart personally, that He was able to, like, start a healing process in me, and really, start a beautiful process of even mourning, like, just with a lot of areas of your life that you might have had a dream about, or an expectation of any kind. Just being able to say that and say that that's okay. That was my feeling, you know. And then He started this process of, I think, healing in me and opening up in ways that I never would have ever imagined. Like, He is the original adoptive Father. He knows the desires of our hearts, and we can let Him know that because He wants to know. And then He takes that and He heals it. And I think, like, Jesus on the cross, what He did for us is the ultimate picture of love, and His resurrection is the ultimate picture of power. And in my life, like, all of that love and that power was made known more to me at that point, because knowing that you would love, like, I was super excited to adopt, but knowing that I would love these two children when I met them, like, I can't even, there's no human way, it is not humanly possible for me to have known that love before. It was all from Jesus, like, the way that I knew that we would love them and care for them forever. He made that love so much more known, and, you know, that He's in my life loving me in that way, and I'm able to see the beautiful creation that He has made in them, and I just never would have been able to come up with that on my own. And so I feel like it's okay. What the process is really important in your life, and naming those things along the way, letting God have those things along the way. He has this whole process, and it is more beautiful than you ever, no matter how it ends up, you know, if you get pregnant and give birth to a baby, if you have, you know, many biological children and adopt, if you foster, if you end up adopting one child or many, just however it works out, it's God's plan, and to be able to trust Him along in that the process is super important, and that's what I have to say.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, I would just say we were married at age 22, so we were immature, even more so than I still remain today. But at the same time, we have been blessed with the grace of a sense of what I've read Pope Francis call, like, a personal encounter with Jesus. And that, you know, was a real active force, even, you know, as a young new married couple. And so that helped put us in situations where ideas of sacrificial love and service and children were always part of that. We were kind of exposed to that as a way of life. And then to Cassidy's point, when like, gosh, our original vision somehow got thwarted, right, in our mind. I remember one of the key lessons that I felt like the Lord was showing us was that, you know, there's a difference between good and bad and preference and non-preference. Like there were times and temptations where we felt like, gosh, this wasn't our first preference, and there's a temptation to immediately call that bad, right? And there's been continue to be multiple points in the journey where it's like really, really hard, and that doesn't mean bad either, right? So to take a step back, like Laura's given us perspective, that it served us well as parents, that just because it's not our first preference, it's not bad. And so that, I think, was really important for us to work through in our walk with Jesus and our walk with each other. And certainly for me, you know, I think part of the duration of our journey was in part due to, you know, the Lord knowing I needed to get ready to become a father. So there's lots of refining. And anyway, I'm still not holy enough to be a father, but you know, he brought me along almost to the point of how great Cassidy is, but still getting there.
Awesome. So I'd just like to open up the floor to any questions that you guys may have, either for the group or for like particular people.
I was interested what it's like in fostering teenagers, actually, because we both have had a lot of years of experience with teens, obviously not in such an intimate setting. But yeah, what was that like? What were the struggles and the joys of that?
The joys are that teenagers are hilarious. They're so funny. And the struggles, especially in foster care, in many cases, the struggle is more with foster care than it is with the kids. The kids are great. They're hurt. They have been badly treated, and they're put in a system that's very broken. Every single kid I've had has been sexually abused. And with that comes a lot of trauma, and especially in teenagers, it comes with a lot of inappropriate behaviors. Many of the teens have been in foster care for several years, so they're bouncing around from home to home. They have attachment issues. They have anger. They've been put in a system where their emotional and mental needs just haven't been properly addressed. And if you think about what that looks like after 16, 17, 18 years, you have this person who's kind of a mess, who has anger issues, who sneaks their 20-year-old boyfriends into your house, who are, you know, going outside to smoke, who are, you know, getting in fights at school. So those behaviors are very, very challenging to address and respond to. So just being aware, if you're going to bring a teenager into your house, you've got a mini adult who's going to try to act like adults, and they'll bring those behaviors into your home, and having a plan for that. You know, my very specific support systems have been good, even though the system itself is kind of broken. You know, I have really good relationships with doctors and therapists and different service providers, and good relationship with the people at the school. You know, they're, you know, I still, even though they're coming from all over, they go to the same school, and you know, that's my district school, so I've gotten to know the people in the administration there, and so that's been helpful. Many of them, about half of them, are on probation when I take them as well. So dealing with parole officers and things of that nature. So does that answer your question? Okay. I don't want to scare you from taking teenagers. I just want to be honest about the challenges. What I love about them, though, is there's still so much hope. Like, I can't imagine being 17, being in 6 different homes, you know, being abused, like, and still like having hope for the future, and having these dreams and still going to school every day and trying. It's very beautiful to see the resilience and strength in humanity. And honestly, that's been my biggest blessing in the whole fostering and adoptive process. I have seen the very, very worst in humanity, in what I've seen these kids go through, but I've also seen the very, very best of humanity and the support that I receive, and seeing the resilience and strength of these kids, and courage of these kids. So, I mean, with your really low lows, you're going to have your really high highs as well. So, it's definitely something to make sure that you're called to do. Or taking home. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question for David and Kris. Did your kids who promised to help you with the children you fostered, did they follow through on their promise?
They did. It was actually pretty remarkable, because like I said, he was a 1-month-old, and we set up a rotation, and a kid would sit up without, or not sit up, but would sleep out with the baby, and they took a rotation. I got to be in that rotation too, and actually it was kind of interesting for me because our other children had been, Kris had nursed all of our other children, so I was useless to them until, they got to be about 6 months, and, oh, maybe I'll spend some time with Dad. But, so I actually got to father this, his name was Marcus, and I got to father him more at that infancy than I did my own kids, and which was pretty, which I think for me was pretty special, But yes, our kids did. They really, they all took turns, and I don't think you pretty much ever had to say.
I'm not sure I'm sure there were a few times they got me up where I did that
Yeah.
first shift, but they would just feed him his bottle, which he was breastfed milk too. We got donors, and we're like,
We
this
were
kid
able to
needs,
do that for a year.
we can do that as best we can, but they would just sleep on the couch and then
Mhm.
feed him when he woke up, and then wake up the next person, and they'd move to the couch.
Yeah.
So then he would do the last shift in the morning. Over the harder thing that's happened as we've gone on doing it is one of the kids has to usually give up their room, right? And so like now our 6th child, she has a room in the basement with her own bathroom, and she doesn't care about the bathroom, but like it's usually her that's like giving it up. So then it's like I feel guilty, like I should, but I shouldn't. And just trying to help them also learn like boundaries, like it's okay to say this isn't good for me right now, and how do we respect their boundaries and their needs, but then maybe we'll just do it for the weekend, and then we have to be hard and fast with the system, right? Like, come and get them by, and we only had, I think we had 3 or 4 teens, which it was always younger kids. But then once they figured out, we had a teen for 3 months.
Mhm.
And, the hard thing for us, I guess, and this is why we had the Lily and Marcus for 2.5 years, was because even though we were pretty sure we weren't called to adopt them, we didn't want to like shuffle them somewhere else. So we'll keep them until this follows through, and the parents' rights having to be terminated, that whole thing. That's why it drug out so long. So once we get someone we have her for a week, well, she's supposed to get to move back home in a month, so we would just hang on, right, with them. And I'm not sure how well we would do with long-term. I was just going to shift to the teen thing, because that was a question too. How well we would do with a permanent teenage placement, because usually we were only having them short-term, so we didn't lay down a bunch of rules. If they had a phone, we weren't really strict about it, except this last one a little bit. But we have these other kids at home, which I think really helped, because there's this family going on, right? There's family life, and so it wasn't like it was just us and these kids. So they would just kind of try to fit in, or not, but my kids would try to encourage them to, participate with us. And we tried to say, our fridge is yours, our food is yours, and some kids seriously would be they don't get to choose anything in their life, foster kids, they don't get to choose where they're going to be, where they're going to sleep. and usually not what they're going to eat. And as for a teenager, I can't even imagine that. And that I'm not sure which teen that happened with, that I just was like, wow, just even knowing I can go to the fridge and eat what I want, like that was really huge. I don't know, like.
Well, I think, yeah, we've had 4 teenagers, we think, during the time, and it has been, there are certainly challenges, you know, like you mentioned, as far as they do come in with a lot of trauma and emotional issues, but our kids, it's been, I think in a lot of ways, it's been real good for our kids that they've just, I feel, really learned some compassion, you know, for these kids, to kind of see a little bit what they've been through and some of their struggles. And I feel like I benefited in a way that, to me, when I have these teenagers there, it's like, okay, it's so, their needs are so obvious, you know, their need for love and to be accepted and heard and stuff like that. It's so obvious, you know, and you feel for their situation. But I feel like I benefited looking at my kids. It's like, okay, wait a minute, they also have these needs, you know, and my kids who sometimes I just let kind of slip by and maybe I'm not quite as intentional. I'm like, okay, wait a minute, no, my daughter's 17, she has these needs too, you know, and I need to love her too and give her these things. So anyway, so that's something that I feel like I've really gained.
I mean, I think it has helped us become better parents, like, you know, with these other kids more so than maybe our own kids. No, I don't know. We're still working at it. But in communication with each other, in communication with our kids, you know, especially now that they're like, okay, do we take this placement or not? You know, we haven't taken any teenage boys yet. And that would be hard because we do have, you know, teenage girls at home. So do we do this, do we not do this? So just don't listen to as much of the story behind it, because I had to finally say, like, call my husband, because I just had a really hard time saying no. So like learning to say no, so I would just defer to him. And I think I really liked what you said about a journey, because this has been a journey for us too, even with the kids we had long term. I needed to learn to say no, because I didn't always have boundaries. Like I would do a lot for other people and say yes a lot. And we have these 2 kids and they're growing up with this and they have some issues and it's getting harder, and my own kids have needs, and I mean, I just felt like our life was just chaos, like all the time. And my friends would tell you it was chaos all the time. And, you know, I actually like didn't lose friends, but friends who just kind of backed away, disappeared kind of, because they probably didn't agree with the decision that we took this on. And he was pretty much always been pretty, I think, not always, but been able to say no. But for Marcus and Lily, like, he wanted to say yes. Like, yes, let's adopt these kids. And we were just talking about this again tonight, because it was the biggest crisis in our marriage. Was I was like, I can't do this. And he was like, I can't let them go. And I was like, when did they become your kids? Are you kidding me? Like, it was really, really hard. So when you said that about the journey, it just made me think, oh, that might be something we want to ponder and pray together. Like, I mean, we have over the years, but it's been painful. And luckily we have stayed in touch with the kids because they were kind of adopted locally, but the last almost a year now, we haven't seen them because we're part of their trauma, because they were with us for so long. And we gave them up. And they were, help me do this, 3 and...
They were 4 and 2.
3 and 5. So like Marcus was like, we would babysit for them. The family that adopted him also has 2 biological kids, and then they have these 2 kids, so they have like stair-step kids. And so we would watch all the kids sometimes, and he actually said to me once, like, do you remember when I was yours? Like, yeah, and there's where my bed was, you know. And so they need to be away from us right now to try to work through trauma and learn how to attach. And that's been hard, super hard on our kids that are still home. Like, we're praying this very long novena right now for them. And, you know, our one daughter, she's like, every night, Mom, I pray, I just want to see them again, you know. So God's using, I think, this journey to help us too. With that, so. I think kids, siblings, and I don't know how many of you would have, kids of your own, they really do rise to the challenge and they learn as long as we can keep listening to them. And we've had to be able to say, like, sometimes, no, it's time, like we can't say yes this time, we can't do this. And then other times, I mean, it's amazing because we had, a daughter who was 15, 16, 17, and the teenagers just kind of hit a switch sometimes where they're just not happy with you. You just don't do anything right. And this one night we got a call on a Friday night at 11 o'clock, right? Can you take these two kids? We're like, it's Friday night. We might as well just take them. Then we get a call back and they're like, well, we need to let you know, like, they have lice. And we're like, been there, done that, we can do that. And our daughter was like, had already been in bed for an hour and a half, asleep out. She was 17, right? She has hopped out of bed, I couldn't believe it. Hopped out of bed, and we've never seen lice like this before. Like, we were up an hour getting the lice, out of their hair so they could go to bed. And I was just like, wow, that was so selfless of her to be able to pull that off. That's not how she always was. So, yeah.
Other questions? I'm curious, like, what are some unexpected fruits? And then maybe, like, I guess maybe this is another question, but yeah, just like, how did this, you guys kind of like set this up really nicely, like, how did this impact your relationship with your spouse or with other family members? Like, was there good consequences from that, or some not good consequences?
For me, I mean, this is kind of simple, but my sister had one child biologically who was our daughter's age, and then we adopted Karina and Parker, and then she went on to adopt a baby boy domestically, and then a daughter from China. And so it's kind of neat because although our experiences have been very different with adoption, we've been able to, I guess, bond with our families and grow closer with all of our kids, and I feel like our kids are really close because of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole, again, 4+ year journey for us kicked communication between us as husband and wife into overdrive, right? And we got married in Northwest Ohio, and then it immediately, well, the first 10 years of our marriage, we were 12 hours away from both our parents, right? So we had a really good opportunity to kind of form our family identity apart from them. But then the adoption process, like, we started communicating with them more too, so I think it helped us communicate with our parents as well. A lot of those expectations of, like, when we don't know, so we're not going to tell, like, lots of false starts and maybes and ifs and a lot of hopes and emotions attached to every one of those steps. So doing the best we can to, like, kind of, still be generous with others, but be mindful of our needs and to stay healthy as we were going through all of that. So I think that was helpful for us. And again, there's been a pattern that's stayed true through parenthood as well.
Well, I don't have a spouse, so that part's easy. So when I told my family, I was like, I'm going to start fostering. What they heard was, I'm going to adopt a baby. And they all kind of freaked out at that. I don't know why, but they were not on board with that. So I should ask, does everybody know the difference between fostering and adopting? Okay, because my family didn't. They did not understand what that was. But once I explained what exactly I was doing, they were all on board. And almost none of them live in town, so it's not a huge day-to-day impact. But when we go visit, they're all very welcoming and kind, which is great. Honestly, the biggest change was actually in my friendships. When I started fostering, I was in my late 20s. So I was at that age where some of my friends were married and starting to have kids, and some were still single and didn't have kids. And what I learned later, like not during that time, it was actually hard during that time, is when you start having kids, your friends that don't have kids don't get it and kind of start drifting away, because I can't just leave the house, to get drinks tonight or whatever. I, need a babysitter, need to make arrangements, or like it can't be spur of the moment thing. So it just changes the dynamic of your relationships, and if they're not on board with that change, then they kind of drift away. So, you learn who your true friends are, I guess, who's willing to make those adjustments in the relationships and who aren't. So that was interesting to go through, and also challenging and hard to learn, like who those people were. But then it was also beautiful to see the people who did step up. Sometimes that was unexpected as well. So it was, now I'm really close to some people that I just wasn't close with before, and it was really unexpected. So that was interesting. You guys kind of alluded to, some of your friends not being on board with your choices. I think I even had somebody like, well, you chose this. I'm like, well, yes, but like, just not being very supportive in that way, or not being supportive and listening to me, vent or those kinds of things. So you'll have the people that are supportive and those that aren't, and learn who's your village and who's not. So.
Yeah, I think one of the opportunities we also had a couple times was knowing the birth parents, especially the first one. We weren't trained foster parents, so we did not know what we were doing, and we were doing visits with the birth parents, and the dad was in and out of jail, and the mom was there, and we just didn't really know what we were doing. So we made friends with the birth mom, and we were her advocate too, which I think ideally in the foster care system in paper, that is what you can try to do, especially for the hopes of reunification. That didn't always play out so well in the courts, but I remember my kids got to know the birth mom too. Like they knew who she was, and they were praying for her too. And our one son was in college when it happened, and we were talking about something that happened with her and the choices she made, and people always are like, oh, how can a mom do that? Like, oh, there's no way they can love their kids. And I think one thing I learned is I'm not sure there's really a parent that doesn't love their kids. And there might be a lot of reasons why that love is not being shown and, being expressed. But I think they do love their kids, and they just have lots of reasons not. But our son said to us, like, well, what do you mean they're judging her? She's addicted. Like, she was addicted to heroin. Like, it's an addiction. And so he, could separate the addiction from the person. And that doesn't, that judgmental thing, I was like, whoa, like, that's good. I was so glad to hear that from him. What is it? It's an interesting thing. The whole system is super hard.
Yeah, I agree, and I know, it's kind of come up a couple of times about, the system, the foster system, and, the fact that it is broken and difficult, and I think that may have been a good, lesson for us in some ways, in that, okay, we're trying to do a good thing, we're trying to help, we're trying to follow this call of God, and dang, why is it so difficult sometimes, and because working with DHS and stuff, there's so many reasons to say, forget it, it's not worth it, The truth is, they're overwhelmed, yeah, it's a broken system, but there's reasons for it. They're overwhelmed right now, with kids, and because of that, I think they get burned out, and there's a lot of turnover, so I can't tell you how many of the social workers and caseworkers we meet that, they're either leaving in a month or they've just started a month ago, and it's just, and working with the kids and the moms, it's heartbreaking, so it'd be such a hard job to do, because so many times they don't have good options. You know, when you get this call at 2 in the morning and, you know, and it's like it's a Friday and these kids are covered with lice and it's like, okay, where else are they gonna go? You know, and sometimes they would spend a weekend at the DHS building sleeping on a couch with one of the social workers babysitting them, you know, and it's like, oh, you know, so it's an overwhelmed system is what's going on, you know, and but you know, kind of I guess come and recognize that and accept it. It's like, okay, God, you know, it doesn't mean it's not what you want us to do, even though it's frustrating and that. And, you know, and I think another, you ask some of the unexpected, you know, fruits of this. And, you know, when we first did this, and the 2-year-old that we got was this wonderful 2-year-old girl, and she was a master of demanding attention. And and she was a firstborn, and, you know, and then our 6-year-old boy, you know, was the youngest, and he struggled a lot. You know, it was really difficult for him, and having these two, and this particularly her, and we struggled. I struggled a lot with him, and again, I kind of look back at some of that and see kind of a similar thing that I said with the teenagers. It's like, oh boy, you know, the struggles that she's had were so obvious, and the need, and you know, the need for compassion and whatever, you know, trying to be understanding. And it's like, okay, I probably was so ready to give it to her, but boy, my kids should know better, you know, and they've had everything, you know, so they should just suck it up. And you know, anyway, so my relationship with him struggled, you know, for the couple of years that she was with us. And you know, so there's some of that difficulty, but it also, I don't know, I think, you know, I was able to recognize that through some of the struggles that we faced, and have been, once again, been able to be more intentional with him too in our relationship and trying to build that relationship. And so.
Yeah, so it kind of turned into this thing where, like, it felt like he was hard on our boy, because, you know, poor Lily. And so then I was overcompensating and being like really giving him the attention that he needed, and so then it turned into this thing with us, like, and then we've had to grow out of that. So now that she's not with us, how do we love him, help him grow up, be responsible, recognize the things that he had? So yeah, I mean, the ways that we've had to grow in our communication, and I mean, one huge thing that's happened with us, you know, Romans 8:28, you know, God works good out of all things. And, you know, the ways our kids were hurt through this, like, our one daughter said it, I'm not sure she'd agree with it anymore, because, you know, for a while, parents just aren't right anyway, but she's like, Mom, it's okay, you know, you said yes, you know, and you usually say yes, and then you have to throw everything together and make it happen, and then it's over, and it's like, you did it. She goes, this time you just chose people. And they don't go away, and she goes, it's okay, we'll just all be in counseling for a while. I'm not sure that's what she thinks now, but yeah, and you know, counseling actually did happen for some of my kids and for our boy, and you know, that was a good thing, because that, the girl we put in counseling for her trauma, and they needed, like, it was somebody who was like in an internship and she needed some more clients. I'm like, can you help him out? You know, so we learned some more things about him because we got this professional help that we weren't expecting. So that's been good too. I think one thing that a lot of people say about should I foster or not, they're like, I just couldn't keep him and then give him up. I couldn't do that. How do I take a kid into my house and then give him up? And the truth is, like, it's not easy. Like, it's super painful. But that's like it's the cross, right? Like, I'm going to love this kid. You know, even if I can only have this kid for a weekend or 3 weeks, like, can I love them and help meet their needs? And you know, saying goodbye to those first two was really hard but we have been able to see them on and off. But there was one case, there was the lice kids. You know, we call these kids by their names. You know. Anyway, we only had them Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday, Monday. And when it was time for them to go, the little girl was like, she knew as soon as I would answer the phone, like, who are you talking to? Who is that? Wait a minute, where am I gonna go? they want me to go with who? That lady? No, you know, and oh my gosh, like I was at a park and I had to drive home and she's like, please, can you just tell him, like, can you tell him that I'm sick and I can't go? And oh my, it was horrible. Like, please don't make me go. And what am I supposed to do, right? Here's this caseworker getting ready to take him to a somewhat relative, and I just had to say to the caseworker, like, please listen to all her concerns. Like, I don't know, but please know this is all the things she said, and, you know, put her in the car. And he was still at work that day, and I just went to mass. We actually had a 6 p.m. mass that night, and I just cried, like, the entire mass. It was just heartbreaking to be, like, letting go and knowing I don't know what's going to happen with these, you know, with these kids. But that doesn't make me want to not do this, because we have love to give. You know, we're not perfect parents. Our family's not perfect, but we do know how to try to love others, and we try to, and we strongly believe in, like you mentioned earlier at dinner when we were talking, like loving the least of these. And so God has to give us the grace with that pain. So that was one thing I always want to say, like, if you're afraid because it'll be hard, well, it will be, but God will give you the grace. And the other thing I've just tried to tell people, like, if you become a foster parent and you really don't think you can take a placement, it's okay, like, to be emergency placement foster parents, and it might turn into longer sometimes, but the need is so great right now. I mean, like in our county, they do spend the night at the foster care office on a couch in a sleeping bag with a care worker, caseworker who has to stay there with them. So even if you're just helping for that one night, you're making a difference, helping them find the time to maybe check out all the relatives and see what they need to do. And maybe, you'll get surprised. And sometimes I wonder, like, is this going to happen? Our latest placement was a call on December 23rd. We're like, okay, who's going to take this kid who had run away, been missing for 6 months, got picked up by the police right before Christmas. And we had all of our adult kids home too, so we're like, okay, we got lots of people to love on her, like, we'll just do this. And we ended up keeping her till January, so 6 weeks, I don't know, might have seemed longer. And this is the first one. Our one daughter was like, she just engaged with our kids. So our youngest two, like, they call her a friend and they want to stay in her life. And I think we've decided, no, we can't adopt her, but we still wonder sometimes. So we've stayed in her life, but we did have to have the boundary to say, no, we can't keep her. So she moved to a residential home. It turns out she is pregnant, and so now she's gonna have a baby, and maybe we'll be at the delivery. We don't even know. Like, we took her in at Christmas time thinking we can do this. Our other kids are home just for like a week or so, but then it turned longer, and we love this girl, right? But are we the right parents for her? I don't know. I'm kind of old and tired, and
we might be. We don't know yet. I was going to say, and I think and this is probably another fruit that's kind of come up is the idea of boundaries. Because boy, you really do have to live with, with boundaries. Certainly when the kids are there, but also when you get that call, okay, it is okay to say no, or it is okay not to keep a child long term. And one of the things that I have to tell myself often is, okay, and really she's kind of probably underplaying how difficult it was when we gave the two kids, up for adoption, because they were 2.5, with us 2.5 years, and the child was a month when he came to us, 2.5 when he left. He was our baby, it was awful. It was awful for me, and I was hearing one thing, and Kris was hearing the opposite, as far as what we were called to do. And I just have to remind myself, okay, God loves these kids more than I do, more than I ever could. And when these children are heading to some place that just doesn't seem good, it's like, okay, but God still loves these kids more than I do, and it might not make sense to me, or
I actually have a question, because with the people that adopted our kids, we tried to warn them about how hard it was going to be. Because in my mind, I'm thinking, like, there was they actually kind of found out about him, and then there was a wrench thrown in, and they had to check out another relative, so they had like 6 or 8 months where they might get these kids, right? And I was like, is anybody telling them, like, maybe you should read about this trauma or attachment, and like, you know, and they've said that to us now, you know, like, they were so ill-prepared. They had like rose-colored glasses on, and their life is still really in crisis. I mean, we're praying a novena constantly for them. Like, what would you recommend, like, preparing for adoption and not knowing, like, the trauma that they've had and how that will play out?
Mhm.
So I don't know if you prepared a lot. Do you feel like did they encourage you to prepare for adoption?
We went, we were living in Connecticut at the time, and there's a children's hospital, Philadelphia. CHOP is a wonderful resource for adoption services and support. And so we lived pretty close, and so we would go there. They would communicate with us and let us know, like, they gave us all kinds of stuff to read and like different classes and like ways of it, you know, games for attachment and like different things that we could do immediately, like right when we met the kids. So I feel like there are those resources in different places. Ours happened to be CHOP, which was fabulous, but there are, I don't know around here because we just moved here a few years ago, but there are those resources at different hospitals, I would say, and for us that was a huge deal. Like, I feel like it did for our, I don't know, I think we, because of reading all of that and like talking with them, we expected to just like if there was a like if it was hard for the kids to sleep, let's say, because that was one of the things, we would expect for them to not sleep. You know what I mean? Like, we would just expect what they were telling us to be on the very far end.
We had 4 years to prepare, right?
Yeah.
So that was like one of the blessings of like the
Right,
curse
it's
of
not
waiting.
like, hello.
Like, we would like go through training and like education, then it would expire and we have to do it again, you know?
Yeah, we might have done all of that a bunch.
So like, and I think, so part of the blessing of that is like, when we did become parents, we were very quick to seek help in services that were available. So it felt like we weren't prepared for everything, but we did not expect it to be easy.
Yeah, and I think, so on the front, when they were littler, we were not expecting it to be easy, and so we did seek out a lot of that, which I would definitely, for any parent at all, would always say, like, push for as much help as you can from a lot of different people, because it's really important for your kids, and it's okay, like, you're not being labeled, you're not labeling your kid, you just, the more help, the better for them as far as services and things like that. But also I would say, like, don't minimize if things are, like, if the attachment is there right away, or you've been able to foster that attachment, or the sleeping is going well, or like different things like that. And I know with older kids it is different, but I would say I would say that later in their life, like, those things are still present from earlier, and they come out in different ways as the kids get older and begin to question. And so I think even just being as open as you can and creating an environment of that's very safe, and like they're able to ask questions at the time when they're ready, and just like the openness of that, I think,
About their own story.
About their story, and it's their story, not your, like, it's not ours, it's theirs, but like as a family, I mean, part of it is all of ours, but also some of it is theirs. And just being able to see that some of what you're seeing later is from that very early trauma that you were talking about, even if it was 8 months, or even if it was just the 9 months of a birth mother being pregnant, you know, like, I mean, there's trauma from that too. And just the separation that you might not see right away. So just to be aware, I think, is important.
All right.
Yeah.
Go.
I was just thinking that was so important. I mean, I've learned a lot about asking for help, and so I think it was when we had those kids, I did have a huge network of support of people that were willing, and some of them were people like I really weren't that close to or didn't know, but they came forward to babysit them. We'll take them for a weekend, and I've learned a lot about like people. They can, you know, as long as you keep giving them permission to say no, but please, I need help. Can you do this? Yeah, asking for help
And accepting help.
and accepting help, right?
Any last chance questions or final thoughts, like last bow on top things you'd like to say?
No bows here.
I think, and this has been part of the theme for the week, is just really staying close to Jesus throughout the process. We talk about the challenges and not knowing what to do with, you know, the kids and stuff like that. It's nearly impossible to do alone. And so being really close to Jesus and keeping him in that discernment and that process and throughout that journey is really important. And it helps, you know, keeping Jesus and his love in that process keeps the humanity in everybody as well. You know, you see the birth parents as, you know, people who are also wounded. You know, you see the kids as, you know, kids who are wounded, not as another kid to watch that weekend or something like that. And just everybody involved. It just keeps the humanity and grace and everything. So that'd be my final piece. If God is calling you to it, he will give you the grace to do it. God equips the called. He does not call the equipped. So you don't have to wait till you're ready, because you'll never be ready for something like this. But he'll carry you through it.
Yeah, and I mean, he would say that. I remember the first time he gave a talk at a retreat about fostering. Like, let's see, we thought about fostering like never. Like, it was not on our radar. It was not part of our plan ever. Not that we were against, yeah. So.
No, but it's, yeah, I mean, and again, we haven't adopted, but foster care, it's been amazing. I mean, it really has been. It's, I truly believe it's been one of the great things that we've done as a family, that we've been able to do, and it's super hard, and it's super frustrating, and it's, anyway, and it's been great, so.
It's part of our journey too, like, you know, the closeness he experienced with Marcus because he fed him, and you know, in our journey, in our marriage, it's actually, even though it was super hard for a while, like it's fostered more intimacy with us because it changed him because of the affection for these kids at a young, you know, especially the baby part, like. So it's just made our marriage stronger and better because we had to work harder on that communication, and you know, when one person changes, then the other person has to change and adapt too. And so our marriage I know it wouldn't be where it is now. And I think in a lot of ways, you know, God has brought up, I don't know if it's our trauma, but our story, right? And he's still writing our story together and individually, and fostering, and so each of those kids has been part of that for us.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I'm just going to assume that if you guys have questions that you'd rather ask any of the panelists one-on-one, that they'll just be around and be here to answer any questions. And if you are interested in pursuing these steps any further, I believe her name is Claire Coleman at Catholic Charities, has been our contact person, and she'd love to. She unfortunately wasn't able to be here tonight, but would love to give you more information about either the fostering or the adoption side of maybe building this addition onto your family. So we'll just wrap up with a quick prayer, if that's okay, and then we'll go in peace. Let's pray in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Dear Father in heaven, we just praise you that you are our adoptive Father. Lord, thank you for making us your sons and daughters, not because we deserve it or because we've earned it, but just by your free gift of grace, your desire to be in relationship with us and to call us your own. Lord, just help all of us to dive into deeper intimacy with you and to understand that our primary identity is in being your sons and your daughters. Lord, if there's anyone here who's feeling the call to fostering or to adoption, Lord, we ask that you just give them every ounce of grace they need to accomplish that. Be a lamp to their feet and a light to their path. Lord, we ask that you bless all of our panelists who have given such amazing yeses to your desire for them. And Lord, we just give you and surrender to you our stories and our futures, trusting that you have only good in store for us. And we ask this all in your name and through the intercession of our Blessed Mother and the Holy Family as we pray. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.